Black conservatives have been called everything but a child of God, Uncle Toms, and traitors to their race. And if I'm honest with you, for the most part, I think there's been good reason.
Black culture is toxic.
Most black people are racist toward white Americans.
Literally in every statistic, Black Americans were doing better under Jim Crow laws.
What do you think DEI is?
Racism against other races.
I think the only racism we've actually seen is the application of systemic racism against white people.
America is not a racist country.
Embarrassing. But I don't want to paint any group, particularly those under the Black umbrella, with one broad stroke, right? If our goal is community and collective racial advancement, then we have to be willing to ask more earnest questions and be ready to provide intellectually honest accounts of our historical and current political reality. So my challenging question to you and the public is, could there be a group of Black conservatives who feel motivated not by internalized anti-Blackness, but a genuine desire to make Black America great? Again?
Make America great again is for us too.
And that's one reason why I'm pro-Trump and I'm a conservative, is because I truly believe in the individualistic approach to the problems that we see within the Black community.
I grew up poor and Black in Akron, Ohio. There is no reason that every single Black kid on the block can do that same thing.
Look at the people who really saying that about Trump. It's not no uppity Negroes. It's Negroes out the real hood.
We're not voting for people who are not serving our communities and serving our best interests.
I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't Black.
Black lives have never, ever, ever mattered to the Democrat Party. Black votes always have.
No, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to Black people.
Is it working?
Okay. If I'm honest, I think the spirit of some of those critiques are valuable. And hear me out. These themes of overcoming racism or challenging your elected officials to speak to one of the most underserved and overlooked demographics in this country, Black people, is something that I can get behind. It's a good thing. After all, the Democratic Party has had a monopoly on the Black vote for over 60 years. So it's worth interrogating why that is. And I don't know. It could have a little something to do with this small movement. I don't know if you heard of it, the Civil Rights Movement. You know, it led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Just these small little things that led to the end of segregation. Nothing too crazy. It could be that Black people remember that Republicans in office at the time opposed civil rights advancement for Black folks and have really had a concerted effort, have made a concerted effort to keep Black folks subjugated since what, the 30s, right? Keep us as secondary and tertiary citizens. But that doesn't mean, again, that we don't critique Democrats to lean into more progressive agendas for the Black community. We have options too now, and we should exercise them. Aside from assigning basic human rights into legislation, we know that along with Republicans, it was what? Bill Clinton, for example, a Democratic president who also was tough on crime, who exacerbated mass incarceration, aiding in the inability of the Black community to actually build or sustain an economic base for growth and advancement. And that's because Democrats are conservative too. And I'll tell you this, I'm not a conservative, right? I'm not a liberal. I try to really listen and learn from progressives. I'm a student, but I'm a student of progressive thought. And so I'll say that conservative isn't a dirty word. There are many people who identify as conservative, a lot of Black people who identify as conservative, but still vote Democrat. Vote for what you would call symbolic change or small incremental changes in a more progressive direction, as opposed to Republican white supremacist regressive legislation. Like, the vast majority, and I mean overwhelming majority of Black people are not Black Republicans. And it's for that reason that I don't address them. I don't even acknowledge Black Republicans because they are insignificant. And not insignificant in terms of their inherent value as a human being. They still have that. I mean, they are quantifiably insignificant. Black people make up 12% of the voting population in the United States. I don't know what this was. Of that 12%, 10% are Republican. That means that Black Republicans make up a fraction of a percent in the larger scheme of American voting. They are insignificant. But I thought it was important for us to have this conversation today because there is a growing percentage of Black folks, in particular young Black men, who are rightfully looking for answers to a system that has failed them on both sides of the political aisle, right? And if we look at the last 3 elections, the only elections I've actually been able to participate in as an adult, we've seen an upward tick in young Black men voting conservative. That bothers me as a young Black male. I think it's worth having a conversation around the danger or the potential danger around that. And I'm not here to fearmonger. Your body, your choice, right? But I do want to have a conversation that is rooted in fact, rooted in history, and that one that is based in an empathetic approach to what I think is best for not just me, but every other Black woman out there. Every other black woman out there.
Everybody want to be a girl. Who gonna be the boys? I keep saying that.
Every other black person out there. I don't know why that just fell out my mouth like that. I think it's important too because there is a unique way that messaging is being disseminated in the digital era that we've never seen before in American history, right? Movements like the right-wing, red pill, white supremacist, conservative, propagandistic movement, come on somebody, has now become decentralized, meaning you don't just have to tune into the news or show up to engage with electoral politics every 2 to 4 years to receive this messaging. These talking points are accessible on podcasts, on YouTube, in the Pop the Balloon episodes, in hip-hop tracks, in R&B songs, in the same discourse that we are having cyclically about who is going to show up in a traditional way in a relationship, right? And it's becoming easier to indoctrinate younger generations, my generation, Gen Z in particular. And I do want to underscore that this kind of white supremacist propaganda is not new. What makes it particularly nefarious and unique in the Gen Z generation is the unfettered access that they have to us because of the amount of information that we consume and the machines that we have access to, the information machines that are our phones that we're always utilizing all day, every day. Because it's not couched in politics. These conservative ideals are not couched in politics at all to these people. It's being couched in culture. And because many black people already lean conservative on a variety of issues, I think that it's worth noting that we could be sensitive to some of this propaganda. And I've gotten pushback on this before, that black people are not socially conservative because we overwhelmingly vote Democrat, because when we look at our political figures through the civil rights movement, many of them have been progressive thinkers. Like, the girls don't want to get into it, but Martin Luther King was definitely in his run me my money, run me my reparations back, and soon thereafter he was pow pow, you know. But I always push back on that and say that, one, black people voting Democrat is not evidence of progressivism, it's evidence of self-preservation. I've already told you, and many black people have always known, that the Republican Party is flagrantly racist and has been actively and overtly fighting to keep black folks subjugated since the 30s. Black people don't vote Republican because we've seen time and time again, when Republicans get in office, the economy suffers, racial tensions rise, and black people experience the brunt of both of those things, right? Right now, we see that the black unemployment rate has risen under Trump, has risen back to pandemic levels. A lot of black conservatives ended up voting for Trump because of the promise of economic opportunity. Well, sister, I want to know how you're feeling about that economic opportunity right now. We've seen the mass firing of federal workers and the removal of DEI hires and the rise in anti-DEI rhetoric, and black women in particular, who make up 12.5% of the federal employees, have been one of the hardest hit by Trump's mass firing of federal workers, with over 300,000 black women being fired. But, they could have predicted that, which is why they voted Democrat. 92%. But it doesn't change what I understand to be, as a person who is in community and has always been in a community with black people, the social conservatism of a lot of black people. Black people are still disproportionately more likely to not be supportive of LGBTQ rights. They are more likely to believe in traditional marriage, and we are the most religious group in this country. This means that when they're attempting to radicalize us in a conservative direction, they bring the Bible right on their chest. They lead with the word of God. And they're focusing on the immoral nature of certain gender structures. And, remember when this country used to really support the Bible in schools. And remember when this country was rooted on Christ, right? In God we trust. They focus on these gendered culture war issues and run away from the racist ideas endemic in the Republican Party.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery for prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Hell no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that.
Kamala supports transgender sex changes in jail with our money.
Kamala even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports. Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you.
That ad was very successful among black people. And I'm not saying that it made more black people vote Republican. What I'm saying is it sparked conversation about how a lot of black people might feel like, you know what, dang, maybe the Republican Party is going too far. Maybe these liberals are going too far. What about the kids? Right? The cultural war issues are a distraction. They've always been that. And you can see how they're trying to get black people to focus on culture as opposed to policies that are going to negatively and already negatively or disproportionately negatively impact Black people. We are in the midst of a culture war, and wars are not won on muscle alone. Messaging is the long game strategy in which you win the war. The battles. Black people are being spoon-fed the idea that the answer to your problem might just be conservatism. We've gone too far, America. The Democrats are focused on everybody else but the group that has built this country brick by brick. Why don't you give us a try?
I'm asking for the vote of every single African American citizen. What do you have to lose?
Honestly, it's insulting. Because instead of acknowledging that systemic racism might just be an issue, the reason why you don't have access to a good job is not because of systemic structures built in place. It's because the immigrants are coming in taking your jobs.
I'm telling the truth. There's no systemic racism.
The reason why heterosexual Black men and heterosexual Black women and the Black family unit is being torn apart is not because of mass incarceration. It's not because of over-policing in Black communities. It's not because they are sweeping these men off the streets. It's because the gay and trans folk are indoctrinating your children, save the kids. And I'll tell you, this is my last point. This is what I think is the most nefarious piece of propaganda that is being targeted specifically to young Black men who find ourselves disproportionately in competitive arenas like sports or what have you, where you really do eat what you kill. You really do get out what you put in. It's about hard work. It's about grinding. That masculine urge to conquer, dominate. This idea of personal responsibility, of being man enough to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and be the decider of your own fate is enough to red pill someone and make them feel like, man, these systems, it's me. I'm in control of what I got going on. It's not the white man. It's this person. It's that person. I'm in control of me.
I refuse to embrace a victim mentality.
And before you know it, you're so far down the anti-woke pipeline, you find yourself saying stuff like this.
It's a lie. White supremacy is a lie.
So today we're going to address all of that with the most intellectually honest, compassionate. I try to be compassionate and historical data driven conversation as we can. That's the kind of discourse I want to engage with you today, because we deserve a Black agenda that includes all of our concerns, no matter where we end up falling on the political spectrum. And I genuinely do believe that. Hey, homeboy, and homies, welcome. And welcome back to the HBC Study Hall, Herbie's Black Cultural Study Hall, a mutual learning space dedicated to the study of Black culture and progressive discourse. And I always say a mutual learning space because everybody, me, you, and whoever else is watching with you, we are all students in the HBC Study Hall. So if you have any comments, corrections, or additional data to provide, please do not hesitate to comment it down below in the comment section. I'm a student of culture and in a constant state of practice. I truly do welcome it. It's been a while since my last video essay over here. I've missed you. Hey, homegirl, I really have. But I've been posting weekly, sometimes a couple times a week over on my second channel, Homegirl Hangout with Herbie. Link will be in the description box down below. It is my weekly podcast where I do a pop culture recap of the most salient stories of the week. And we try to add a little bit of cultural analysis, a little bit of comedy. It's a vibe. Oftentimes I go live. I've now changed the structure of the show where I go live exclusively on Patreon and then release the full episodes every single Sunday. So you don't want to miss it. Honestly, since this channel hit over the 100K mark, I've wanted to be more strategic about the stories that I bring to you. I feel like this audience, it's like, damn, this is a big audience now. And so I want to talk about things that I think are actually going to move conversations forward and that are just the kinds of things that I think such a large body of people deserve to hear. So there are so many ways we could approach this topic about Black conservatism, because there are so many there are so many reasons that bring Black folks to conservatism. But Jubilee recently did a video, 1 Black radical versus 20 Black conservatives, featuring the demure Amanda Seals. And I feel like the claims that she raised, the talking points raised, were really representative of the discourse that I find myself having with Black conservatives in my own family. When I have to see them in enclosed spaces at something like a family gathering, the progressive in me can't help but to once I hear, well, you know, Trump did more for Black people than Obama ever did. You don't have to swing. You don't have to swing. I must. You know, and I have my criticisms of Obama, but what we won't do is erase history and say things that are just, intellectually dishonest. With that being said, I felt like so many of the core tenets of Black conservatism were represented in that video. And so I feel like it would be really, really cool, considering this is a study session and we are in the HBC study hall, that we would use that group of Black conservatives as the representative sample, or the representative group of the the very, very small Black conservative population. So Amanda asserts 4 separate claims throughout the show, and they are as follows. 1, it is undeniable that reparations are just and necessary. 2, Black on Black crime is a result of underinvestment and over-policing. 3, systemic racism isn't a theory. It's our lived reality backed by data and history. And 4, Black conservatism fails to address the needs of the working class. And I do believe the points that she made and the counterpoints asserted by the Black conservatives on the cast are representative of the most fundamental ideals of Black life, Black struggle, Black liberation, and our ideas about how we navigate all of those things. So let's start with claim 1, reparations.
My first claim is it is undeniable that reparations are just and necessary.
So I think we should start by saying exactly what reparations are so that we can know what they're not. Okay, reparations, and this is a direct quote, reparations are an act of making amends for past wrong or injury, typically through financial payment, property, or other forms of redress. It's really quite simple. If you believe in the principle that folks who do harm or cause harm, financial, bodily, generational harm, have a responsibility to right that wrong in the ways that they have wronged you, plus interest, or just maybe even just in those ways, then you might believe in the notion of reparations. And the United States actually falls under the umbrella of the group of people or the institutions who have demonstrated that reparations align with their core values. We can look at Japanese Americans in the 80s who were wrongfully placed in internment camps and received over $1 billion in reparations. We can look at Native Americans who received reparations in a number of ways, most notably, and I have them written right in front of me, most notably the Indian Native Commission, which roughly $1 billion were paid to 176 tribes. The Alaska Native Claim Settlement resulting in 44 million acres being given back. Heavy on back to the Native Americans, and the Cowbell Settlement of 2012, which alone resulted in a compensation of $3.4 billion. And it should be noted that there were many forms and many other disbursements of reparations in a variety of different forms, but also that a lot of these funds have been mismanaged. Native Americans are still fighting and seeking restitution in the courts in a number of different ways. But what is certain here is that the United States government has demonstrated its willingness to financially compensate those who they've harmed, including the slave owners. Yes. Under the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act, slave owners received up to $300 for every single slave that they freed. They received money for the lost wages that they received for losing slaves. And what did the slaves get, you asked? I'm glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked that question. Nothing. Well, what we did get was a promise. We got a promise from the Union General William T. Sherman.
40 acres in the mule. This is bigger than the music.
Land that, according to Bloomberg, would have been worth $3.1 trillion, and that's trillion with a TR, trillion dollars today. Yeah, I'm upset about that. Yeah, I'm upset about that little bit of change. And please, I don't even want to hear it. You get mad at the girl who owed you $20 for the past 2 weeks because she said she was going to pay you on Friday, and Friday was 2 weeks ago. Okay? Girl, you're late. It's been 2 weeks. Where's my money? If you think I'm going to let go of $3.1 trillion that you've been owing me and mine since 1865, you are sadly mistaken. I think not. Right idea, wrong. Not in this economy. Misting eggs are $8. Red Lobster has gotten rid of the endless shrimp. Like, it's a lot. We're losing recipes. Like, not right now. It's just like my finances. So every chance I get, I'm going to read you. And when I catch you,
I'm going to punch you in your mouth, your throat, and your solar plexus.
Anyway, as you might have imagined, every conservative on that panel that Amanda spoke to pushed back or argued against why Black people should even receive reparations.
Why is that fair for people who never had slaves, who have to pay for people that had slaves?
Right. Listen, they argued a lot of different things. But I would say we could boil their arguments down to two things, really. This idea of assuming personal responsibility, which they're obsessed with, and this idea that reparations aren't actually possible. It's merely a distraction that Democrats are feeding us that they're never going to do. You know, I think the personal responsibility argument is an interesting one because a lot of people would resonate with it, right? Like, in a modern America, so much has changed for us. This is a post-civil rights America. We've had a black president, for God's sakes. I have all the same opportunities as anybody else, and so I should be able to pick myself up by my bootstraps and not necessarily rely on government assistance, especially if you come from the inner city where you see, and this is something we'll get into a little bit later, you see black people abusing the system. And I put air quotes around that loosely as a girl from the inner city, from the hood. And again, we'll get to that a little bit later. And if I don't get to it, remind me. We'll talk about it. It really all boils down to this refusal to be a victim. This idea that you can be in control of your destiny. And I can respect the idea of, you know, rising to the occasion of hard work in spite of structural racism. What I can't respect is the refusal to acknowledge that structural racism exists to impede black advancement. I don't know if you know this, but according to the United States Federal Reserves, white households hold over 84% of all of the wealth in the United States. That means the remaining percentage, what is that, 16, is split amongst everybody else who's not white. And guess what percentage black people hold? Just 3. 3%. And before we can actually ask whose responsibility is it to address that and immediately say that it's white people's, it's the government, it's black people's, we do have to know how that such a drastic difference, right? Black people, white people, and Native American people have been here the longest, starting with Native American, and then we can move down the ladder. And so when we look at the wealth disparities, we have to ask, how does such dramatic and significant racial wealth disparities come to exist? Because if we don't ask that question, we would just respond by something that's informed by feelings and not facts. And, you know, the facts don't give a fuck about your feelings. Now, I don't know much about algebra, but I got my glasses on and I know that 1 + 1 should never equal 0. When I clock in and I clock out, at the end of the week, I want my check. And when there's no check present, we got a problem. So let's talk Blackonomics. I want you to remember just 4 numbers because we're about to get into some mother tucker thing. 42 trillion, 200 million, 270 million, and 75. You got it? Good. 42 trillion. So it is 1860. Yes, honey. We are going to talk history because you don't get where you are without the things that have happened before you. I mean, come on, it's a basic concept. Don't be weird. 1860, the last year before the Civil War. There were about 4 million enslaved Africans at the time. The economic value of an enslaved person was about $1,000 per slave. Basic math will tell you that that brings us to about $4 billion in economic value on slaves or enslaved people. What you should also know is at that time, the banks, railroads, and factories were worth $3.5 billion combined. What does that tell you? It's not only fair to assert that slavery was foundational or a part of, you know, the American economy. It is a significant and the primary reason for why the American economy is the richest country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world. And of course, slavery is 400 years of unpaid labor. Unpaid labor is a core tenet of the slave economy and why they're able to make so much profit. Now, this unpaid labor went to enrich shopkeepers, bankers, and insurers. And that's because the literal bodies of enslaved people were considered assets. You know, you go to the bank and they say, do you have any assets? You say, oh yeah, I own a home, whatever. They could use the bodies of black people as assets to get credit, to build their wealth, to get loans, start businesses, what have you. So it's worth noting firstly, just off top, because I got to say this for my ancestors, this one's for Harriet. When we say we built this country, we don't mean that metaphorically, hyperbolically, proverbially, or in any other way, but literally. Our backs, our bodies were used as financial assets and capital through which white people could gain more capital. The slave economy was not just about becoming rich, it was about becoming richer. Now, how this ties back into reparations is that we have to find a way to quantify 400 years of unpaid labor, legal impediments to building wealth, interest that would have been accrued but was lost, and working like a dog day and night, drinking coffee from a pot none of you want to touch. It's very difficult to do. I'm finna take off running.
You know why black people run away when we laugh? because we weren't allowed to laugh on those plantations. This is stuff that lives in us, y'all.
But my economist friends and social scientists over at Bloomberg were able to quantify all of the aforementioned points, right? The interest accrued, the inflation, the unpaid labor, the working like a dog day and night, drinking coffee upon anyone is touch. They were able to aggregate all of those numerical data points, and they arrived at $42 trillion cash. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the current GDP of the United States is around $29 trillion. That means that the slave economy begetted more money than the GDP of the United States in 2025. And I do want to say this to the people who say, like, what about the white people who never owned slaves? Like, should they even have to pay these reparations to black people, really? You know, I've thought about this long and hard. And yes. Well, yes. Because owning slaves is not the only way to benefit, and has not been the only way that white people have benefited from the slave economy. Cotton was the largest and most important export in America during antebellum slavery. It fueled trade, banking, shipping, and industrial industries. The profits from that cotton can be directly traced back to local businesses, from tailors to blacksmiths to milliners to furniture makers. Need I go on? Even if your great-great-great-granddaddy didn't own slaves, he may have worked from a company that benefited directly from the slave economy, right? He was working at the local Levi's, the local Raymore and Flanagan, the local bank. Everything benefited from the slave economy directly. And Amanda raises this point in the video. It's a matter of values, right? Like, we pour into Social Security and other systems because we value, at least I'd like to believe, our neighbors' lives. You work all your life. You should be able to get to a point where you can retire. And society should be able, like, social services, you shouldn't be in the richest country in the world and be the closest to death that you've ever been in your life and be worried about how you're going to sustain what little years you have left. Right? But we're not going to get into a conversation about how society should be restructured to actually be considerate to human beings. That's another topic for another day. But this does bring me to my next number, 270 million. In 1862, the federal government distributed 270 million acres of land, stolen land, to mostly white Americans. It was called the Homestead Act. Are you familiar? Well, even if you aren't familiar, you're probably a descendant of one of the homesteaders. There are approximately 48 million descendants of the homesteaders right now in America. And we know that real estate is like the number one way that Americans pass down wealth across generations. And I'm gonna give you this. There were black homesteaders, but we know what happens when kids get a little piece of something. When we decide to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and assume personal responsibility. Tulsa, Oklahoma happens. Yeah, we're moving to the next number, 200 million. A lot of you are familiar with the 1921 Tulsa massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, aka Black Wall Street. And if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Hi, I'm somebody. Welcome to the HBC Study Hall. Have a seat. No, sit down, take your time. Pour a glass of wine, some tea. We're vibing out. So Tulsa, or Black Wall Street, was physical evidence of black excellence. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was definitely evidence of black people's ability to be able to rise economically in spite of white supremacist deterrents and impediments. Systemic racism. And it was burned to the ground by white people. I don't think there's, I don't want to tiptoe around that and make it like, how do I say this so people feel, no, this is a fact. This is what happened. Bloomberg estimates that $200 million in damages were caused from that. And of course, the Tulsa Oklahomans rebuilt all of those damages in the years following, and they would go on to be displaced due to systematic racism. Again, another topic for another day. But I think what's clear to me is a lot of people think that this was an anomaly. That what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma is an anomaly, that, okay, we built ourselves up and those white people were bad. And also, well, let me finish that thought. Those white people were bad and they came and did a bad thing. But it's not true. There are innumerable times this happened. Seneca Village, New York, Elaine, Arkansas, the New Orleans Massacre, the Atlanta Race Massacre, Rosewood in Florida, Oscarville, Georgia, which is now known as Lake Lanier, a lake that only exists because they flooded an entire town where black people were living and thriving. And I don't even want to tell you what they did to them people in Philly in 1985. That's not that long ago. The 80s was not that long ago. Your mama was dipping and doing in the club in the 80s with the perm that was all wrong. Just Google it. And I say, and I want to insert this here because a lot of times people are saying like, so you're saying all white people are bad, that they have to pay for the sins of their ancestors. I would never, ever, ever in my life, you'll never catch Herbie Revalis saying that all white people are bad. I think that white people, just like any other people, have a propensity to be good or bad. I don't not like white people. I have an issue with the structure of whiteness. Whiteness as a structure that benefits white people economically, socially, legally, culturally, generationally, where they are able to navigate with the presupposition of superiority. That doesn't mean that every white person thinks that they are superior, but it means that we exist in a system, in a context where this is capitalism, Miss Mamas. And so when there is one racial group that holds 84% of all of the country's wealth, and everybody else is, is fighting in that 16%. We have to have a conversation about, no, I'm not mad at Sally Joe from up the street who's living her life doing her thing. I couldn't care less. But the institution of whiteness is a problem, and we need to address that. Let's move on. I don't know. It just bugs me out, especially when Republicans are pushing this idea of personal responsibility, because it's like that is only effective on people who either don't know the history, who don't imagine or don't know what's possible for them, or just are not as petty as me. Are not as girl, I'm still waiting on my $3.1 trillion from 1865. I need that. And if not, every chance I get, I'm gonna read you. Let me take my chain off. Talking about small government. Now, I have many issues with the American government, but I ain't no fool. I know because I read that the black poverty rate has been on a steady decline since we've received civil rights in this country, that we have economically benefited from governmental intervention, from discrimination becoming federally illegal against black folks, and hiring practices in education across various different sectors of economic advancement, and just civil liberties and rights that didn't come from the government sitting out and being like, y'all talk about this amongst yourselves, we'll work it out later. And I'm not saying it to say that Democrats are, my intention is never to angelify Democrats. It's just to be real about what has happened, what has benefited us most. And it's not been Republicans. And don't get me, we'll have a different conversation. I got the grift up here. If y'all want, we'll have a different conversation about the Republicans before the 1930s, when the Republicans were not the party of Lincoln, but the party of Frederick Douglass, because hello, if you don't know the difference, and like if you don't know how to understand the switch that happened from the Republican Party that freed the slaves, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation because of a lot of pressure directly from Frederick Douglass, that biracial man that helped free the slaves. Thank you. And then how we've gotten to this party that is incredibly racist today, the Republican Party. I really, really would recommend The Grift by Clay Kane. He's so handsome and so smart. It is called The Grift, The Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. It helped me really understand, because I'm like, wait, the Republicans freed the slaves, then was not fans of the New Deal, then were not fans of civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, not fans of the Voting Rights Act, not fans of the EEOC. Like, so many things, it's like, it feels like a contradiction, and it's very easy to become confused. So I really, really, really recommend this book. It's why I got it propped up back there, because I want the people to know the theme, period. So that brings me to my last number, 75. Today, 75% of white families own homes, compared to less than half of black families who own homes. Why is that? Redlining.
You shaking your head that redlining doesn't exist?
I'm saying I don't think it really existed at all.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired, boss. Redlining. I suggest you read The Color of Law, another book. I'm just going to keep recommending things. Typically, I recommend these over on my Patreon or on my Substack, but these are things that I think that every fucking black, this is an intra-communal call. If you are white or non-black on the call, hey, bro, get this book as well so that you can understand the things. Honestly, I feel like if you view yourself as a good person, as a global citizen, as a person who's interested in just not being shitty, I don't know, like caring about other people, I would recommend you read Color of Law. It really talks about how segregation is is and was and remains the responsibility of the American government to dismantle, because it was the American government and these businesses and these institutions that created de jure segregation. So I suggest you read this book. It's one of my best books in my arsenal. The Grift, The Color of Law. It's not for the weak of heart, but it is easy. It is a decent read. It's not an easy read, but it's a decent read. So I don't know. Actually, easy is subjective. Anyway, get your book.
My next claim is that black on black crime is a result of underinvestment and over-policing.
Okay, so in a conversation about black on black crime, you can't start that discourse without acknowledging two things. One, economics. Any conversation that's talking about crime and not talking about socioeconomic status, wealth, or the lack thereof is not a conversation worth having, because that person doesn't know enough about the topic to actually engage in something that's meaningful. They're not going to inform you with information that tells you the truth of not just American society, but societies globally. Where there is increased poverty, there is increased crime. There are boatloads of data to support that. I encourage you to look into that. 2, intra-racial crime, or crime committed by someone of the same race as you, is statistically normal. Whether you are black, white, brown, or polka dot, you are most likely to be harmed, particularly in the context of homicide, by someone who is of the same race as you. So the FBI tells us that about 88% of black homicides are committed by black perpetrators. But they also tell us that approximately 81% of white homicides are committed by white perpetrators. The biggest threat to white people being unalived are other white people, and vice versa. What does that tell you? I don't know. According to the Brookings Institute, the average white person lives in a neighborhood where it is 75% white. And similarly, black people live in neighborhoods that are mostly black. Perhaps the likelihood of you being unalived has more to do with proximity than race. I don't know. So why are we committed to this idea of black on black crime and consistently regurgitating we kill our own, right? As if it's a phenomenon that's specific to black people or unique to black people.
You said kill a little black person?
No, I said black people, but it is a matter of racism.
Race?
Now, I feel like a lot of people might want me to say that this is anti-blackness. Those people are self-hating. When black people say that, they're self-hating. That is not how I feel, mama. Actually, in my opinion, that's a gross understatement. As a person who grew up in the hood, Trenton, New Jersey, you Google right now the crime statistics of Trenton, New Jersey in the context of the state. You know, North Trenton and Camden, we the big three. Don't need a big speech. We made the biggest impact. Check a spreadsheet. Now, I say that to say, I love the city that raised me. But as a person who grew up in the hood, it is very easy to understand why people say that it just can't get it together. There was a young black woman and man conservative on this show that both raised interesting points that I think are worth talking about empathetically today. I agree with this to a point. I do. Of course, there are structural factors always to be considered, like the preschool to prison pipeline, mass incarceration, an education system that doesn't actually get the funding to properly teach or help kids navigate a myriad of things, right? There aren't third spaces for kids in inner cities, so they end up going out and participating in harmful activity. But what is also true is I grew up hearing my mom talk about, like, I used to be able to walk out and, you know, be outside until the street lights was on, and if my grandma would yell, like, you know, Tina, come home, and if I didn't hear her, other neighbors would come out and scream, Tina, you know that's your grandma calling you down the street, right? And you know, where my teachers would know my parents intimately and my neighbors, and not just neighbors that live next to you, but neighbors on your whole block know everybody. And going to get sugar from your neighbor was more than just, oh my God, I'm out of something, can you help me? It was communication that sustained community. It aided in people feeling safe around the older folks around them. And it really led to this idea of, like, it takes a village to raise a child and a village to support each other, right? I think about, even before my mom, obviously, I think about the civil rights movement with the Montgomery bus boycotts, and how when they were on this over year-long journey of boycotting the buses, people were doing like, hey, where do you work? All right, y'all ride with me. It's just going to be me and my car. I know you don't have a car. You don't have a car. You don't have a car. I'm going to drop you off. Getting up early to drop people off and take them to where they had to go. And, you know, you got to drop your kids off at school. You know, give me your kids. I'm going to put them in my car. They come with me. Community. It gets me a little emotional because that's not the experience that I had growing up. I grew up in a time where it's like they shooting people in broad daylight, mama. You see somebody approaching somebody in a nasty or negative way, you don't go and get in the middle of that. You mind your business and you get home safe. This is the advice. I remember, I have cousins whom I love and adore who lived in the projects, and I loved going around them. My mom took us around there sparingly because while I grew up in Trenton, it wasn't the projects now. Which, shout out to the projects girlies. There was a different experience. Like, you don't talk to your neighbors. You don't know them. When something happens to them, you keep moving. You get home to me. Right? You come home safe in one piece. Your neighbor isn't necessarily a community member. Everybody could be an op if you don't know them.
Black on black crime
Absolutely.
my whole life. I don't believe it have nothing to deal with the police. It's more with the community because there's a lot of pride that's in that city. I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna take him out. Yeah. It's that simple in New Orleans.
It's just that simple, he says. I think another talking point we hear from the right often about the reason for black on black crime is not necessarily something that's structural, but more the bad decisions of folks within this given group is absentee fatherism.
What would you say are the biggest issues plaguing Black America today, in your personal opinion?
Number one is father absence.
Yes.
Everything that happens is secondary to that.
What is the root cause of there being less fathers present?
Bad decision making on the part of the father.
And I wanted to engage that more empathetically as well, because approximately 47.5% of black children live without a resident father, compared to 21% of white children and 39% of Hispanic children. Children from fatherless homes are much more likely to be involved in criminal or delinquent activity. I believe it's approximately 85% of youth imprisoned come from homes without a father. And the data shows that fatherless kids are more likely to be incarcerated or engage in violent behavior. Father absence is correlated with low academic achievement in primary and secondary schools. And we also see evidence to support the correlation between absentee fatherism or fathers not being in the home with struggles with behavioral issues, psychological stress, emotional regulation problems, poverty, or increased likely to remain impoverished. A bunch of different things that you just don't want for the next generation. And I think a lot of times in the academic circles that I'm in, when I'm around progressive folks, it feels like so much of the conversation is about systemic racism, is about structural barriers like mass incarceration that is leading to fatherlessness, right? And I don't think there's enough conversation from folks who grew up in the communities where we see the most representation of fatherlessness. And the reality is, while, systems like the welfare program were broken, right, requiring mothers to report the absence of a father to qualify for benefits, often disqualifying or reducing aid if an able-bodied father was in the home, that is true, right, if he was found in the home. And so people will argue that incentivized women to raise their children without another parent in the home in order to get those food stamps. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we have to have a conversation about how frequently there are multiple family homes in the black community. It's disproportionate. I gotta be real with you. A lot of times these niggas don't want to be dads. Like, I don't know how else to put that. Roughly 46% of black women with 2 or more children have children by more than one partner, compared to less than 29% of non-black women. And I don't think that's just because black women want to have children by multiple fathers. If that's what you want to do your thing. But I think it's because a lot of times there is a commitment issue here that the girls are just not acknowledging in these academic circles. I've heard it over and over again. They're just not interested in being a father or feel like they can adequately parent multiple homes. And I'm not convinced that fathers can adequately love and parent the children that are under their own roof because of the complexity and the nuance and the multiplicity of an individual child's needs, not to mention when you have multiple children. So I think that it feels like a losing argument, or like you don't understand where people are coming from when you say, oh, the reason why there aren't fathers in the black home is because of mass incarceration, is because of, even welfare, when it's like, no, It's because these niggas don't want to commit. And people will say that's not a political issue. That's not a Democrat or Republican issue. That's a culture issue. We're losing recipes. We're losing things as a community, right? And so when someone like Candace Owens says the Black community was stronger during the civil rights movement, we had a community.
Black America, that's when everything fell apart for Black Americans. Our families were together, kids were performing better. I mean, it literally in every statistic, Black Americans were doing better under Jim Crow laws.
You know, it's a disgusting thing to say. However, the Black family unit was more together. I'd argue that's more to do with economics, but there was more of a community ideal. I always use the Montgomery bus boycotts as an example. I think we have to ask questions about what structures came to destroy the Black community and how did those structures benefit from that, but also acknowledge how people feel about the fact that when structures tear down community resources and community-minded action, right, through various different racist policies, that affects the culture and the environment and the way people think within that community. And so it becomes very easy to say, these niggas just ain't on shit. And I just want to give those people grace as well. You know, this is something I want to say to people who are intellectuals, the Black bourgeoisie. Until you lived in the hood, until you've done the things that I've done, we know that there are people making bad decisions because they are also systematically underserved. It's due to a lack of resources. They are victimized by a structure. The people who don't have a gang of homeboys, an illegal network of homeboys, are also or disproportionately more victims of that society. So it's very easy to feel like, you know, this idea of like defund the police, I'm hearing the left saying, and, you know, abolish the prisons. Girl, fuck that. Do you know what it looks like to not have a car? You gotta walk to the bus stop as a queer person. And a lot of times these talking points I'm not able to get in space with heterosexual Black men to have these conversations because they automatically view me as other, inferior, disgusting, or just not worthy to be in space and respect in a real way. I think a lot of women can relate to that. A lot of Black women, a lot of brown and poor women can relate to that who are in these inner cities. It's not safe for the dolls. It's not safe for people who, like I said, are not them. And so until you know what it feels like to have to walk to the bus stop all hours of the night, to get to the local grocery store and have to walk back, and the fear that's instilled in you. You can't think about what it looks like to attack the war that is being thrust upon you by structural systems because you're still trying to fight the everyday battle of the niggas around you. I've never been the person, and this is why I battle so much with people who are saying like defund the police and abolish the prison system. Not because I don't understand that it's a vestige of you know, slave catchers and slavery, etc. But because I know what that feels like. Anyway, that brings me to what was perfectly said, and I think this is a perfect way to put a button on this. I don't know if you guys follow Doss Discourse, Joshua Doss. He is a political poster and I believe a senior researcher in DC. Beautiful heterosexual Black man. I want to always say heterosexual because I don't want, me saying beautiful doesn't mean anything except for I have eyes and they work. He said something where he said that rappers are smarter than economists. I want to play that because this is a beautiful exercise in empathy.
Rappers are smarter than economists, and I'm about to use my grandmother to prove it. This is going to be social media excellence. I want some type of award after this video. This is my grandmother. Her name is Annie Pearl. They call her Hattie because she wears a lot of hats. She lives in the Inglewood neighborhood in Chicago, historically known as one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. You know how they rap about O-Block? Where she lives is about 0.5 miles away from there. When I talked to her this morning about what Donald Trump is doing, militarizing the police in these cities, having the FBI and the DA and all these other federal level officers running around in these cities, she said to me, but Joshua, if there are more police with more guns, won't the crime stop? Think about her living her entire life in Inglewood. When she walks out of her front door, she does not fear some white cop with a gun. She fears these little dudes running around in her neighborhood, shooting at stuff, selling drugs, trying to rob her house. I've been in her house when they tried to break in. If you do not understand why she thinks this way, why she would think more cops would equal more safety, then you cannot talk to her about a solution in a way that will land with her because you don't understand her life. You also need to understand that she wants the crime to be gone worse than you. Worse than you, white policy wonk who lives in DC and reads the New York Times every day. Worse than you, liberal white man, poli-sci major who went to George Washington, has never seen the inside of a public school. She wants it worse than you. The only issue with her thinking is that the data don't back it up. The real world consequence of adding more police in her neighborhoods does not add more safety. We have 62 years of data that have already answered this question for us, coming from the National Policing Institute and others that say that the overall effect of militarizing the police and adding more police, the overall effect of police size on crime is so small that it barely meets measurable statistical significance. Meanwhile, they use your tax dollars to round up people and put them in jails that you pay for. And because those jails aren't doing any rehabbing, those people come out and repeat offend in your neighborhoods. And you get a shit ROI, return on investment. The only person getting a good return on investment is the person who owns the prisons. Why? You know why? Because the only thing that has actually been proven to stop crime is focusing on the economic determinants of crime, the economic conditions that create crime. And hip hop has been screaming this at you for years. Because without this drug, that's once. That's twice. Those are the economic determinants of crime. If my sneaks start leaning and my heat stop working, then my heat start working, I'ma rob me a person. I just saved you a 20-minute read on a 10-year study about the economic determinants of crime from the World Economic Forum. That's the summary. Hip hop just summarized it in 14 seconds. So tell me, the same president that wants to put military on the street just passed a bill that takes away healthcare from 17 million Americans. What do you think that that'll do to crime? It takes food assistance from 10 million Americans. What do you think that that'll do to crime? It takes healthcare away from children. It raises taxes on the poor. What do you think that that'll do to crime? Were you listening? Pay attention to hip hop. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
I mean, beautifully said. I think we can close this piece by saying I don't have the answers on how to solve or navigate this perfectly. What I will be honest about, and if you have answers, please, like I said, we are in conversation. So comment right now. I'll wait. Comment down below. I look forward to you guys. And when I say you guys are my homies, I mean that. I think I have the most philomathic community on earth. Right? People who love to learn, people who are curious, right? Somebody said to me, the most interesting people are the folks who are the most interested. And so please comment if you know things that I don't know, if you put me on. But what I will say is, if I'm honest with you, I can't come to what feels like a more simple academic conclusion to come to in the context of reparations, where I can say, like, here's what the historical and contemporary data says, run me that check. When it comes to black on black crime, or the crime that is experienced, not a statistic and numbers on the board, experienced in real life, I don't have an answer for you, because in the same breath as I say 12, I say them niggas too. You get what I'm saying? So largely the pushback, and we got to speed this up because I've been chatting. Largely the pushback that I've seen to this from everyone on this panel is that, like, essentially, and I do think it's representative of a lot of the conservative population by and large, and that is that there is no system impeding me from being successful. Nothing has stopped me from being successful. So if I was able to do it, what stops the other black person who is also black? Why can't they do it as well?
There is no reason that every single black kid on the block can do that same thing.
And to that, I'll say this. Individual examples or approaches of success or to success don't help the black collective. If you're not community minded, if you don't care about actually getting black people from 3% of the United States wealth, despite contributing more wealth to the United States than the GDP right now, if you don't, that's not something you're concerned around, then go on and do your individual thing. But if you are actually concerned around black people rising and honestly just getting a fair shot at wealth, a fair shot at civility, a fair shot at being treated as humans fully in the law and in life, then you would understand that the individual approach is not going to help the black collective. I mean, there is innumerable data on this, and I'll provide that either in the description or over on my Patreon, likely, because I know you girls will actually get into it and actually read it. So I'll probably put that on the Patreon for you all. But this kind of also speaks to the next claim that Amanda makes, which is like, conservatives fail to address the needs of the working class. We've seen the most historic advancement for black people when there is collective action in community, in coalition, which is why there have been multiple efforts to deter or deteriorate black coalition, right? From freedom from slavery, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, resulting in higher income and higher college enrollment for black folks. I could go on, but the reason that these advancements have been cut every single time have been systemic, baby. Redlining, Jim Crow, the war on drugs, the war on crime, which allegedly some people say, and this is alleged, I don't know this to be true. Allegedly, the people say that crack was placed in the communities, black communities, by the CIA. But that's alleged. Don't take that as fact. It's not fact. It's alleged. I'm dead serious. You know, these ideas fuel the prison industrial complex. They fuel the deterioration of our communities. And like I've said, like I brought up the Montgomery bus boycotts. The reason why that was successful in leading to the desegregation of the buses and largely desegregation of the United States is because we were able to move in community. Personal responsibility, Miss Thing. There are structures in place to I can't. The individualistic approach to shut up. I don't know. I'll leave you with this. White people hold $99 trillion in American wealth compared to black people's $4 trillion. If you think a couple hardworking billionaires or bootstrapping niggas is going to change that, you got another thing coming. You got another thing coming, baby. I think my biggest issue with this, the nefariousness of this secret agenda by black conservatives that they are knowingly or unknowingly pushing is that the immediate goal is not that black people vote conservative right now. There are a myriad of goals for you to stay home. I don't know if you guys know, but the Channel 4 News reported in 2016 that Trump disproportionately targeted allegedly 3.5 million black people, black Americans, under a file entitled Deterrence. So his goal was not to get black votes. His goal was not to bring black people out and switch them to conservatives. His goal was to get black people to stay home, allegedly. It is dangerous not to understand that like these podcasts and like these conservative ideals that are regressive towards women, regressive towards queer folks, to not see the interconnectedness of these of the nature of this. And we're going to talk more about this in another video that I have coming out about intersectional feminism. So stay tuned. Make sure your notifications are on. This is one half of a conversation that we'll continue to have under the current regime that we're living in, because I think it's important that we do so. So I'm going to turn this conversation over to you. I want you guys to light it up in the chat, light it up in the comment section. Let me know what you're thinking. Please comment, comment, and hype. YouTube has a new feature called hype where you can, I believe, find it around the comment section. If you're on your phone, you can kind of like swipe and hit hype. Find it. Hype the video if you can, because that helps boost it up in the algorithm, and I want as many people to get introduced to this as possible. Also, support an independent journalist. I am an actual independent journalist, and even on my second channel, when I'm talking about something as frivolous as pop culture, I always try to be culturally critical and call out systems that relegate women, queer folks, black folks, brown folks' lives, subjugate us in a myriad of ways. And the algorithm is not always the most happy about that. And so the best way you can support me is by subscribing to the Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, if you think more people should see this, this is only brought to you by my Patreon members. They are the reason why I'm able to stay afloat. I love you bitches down. You know I love you too bad. So if you can support me in that way, it means the world. If you can't, I totally understand that. Like, comment, hype, do what you can. Mwah. And I think that's that on that. I think I have so many more things to say, but I want to turn it over to you so that we can have more of a dialogue. All right? Let me know how you feel about the agenda of the Black MAGA and Black conservatives. I want to know. Before I let you go, I will never leave you without saying this. I am in a constant state of practice, and so are you. You can never fail when you're in a constant state of practice. I love you. My whole world.